Hello and welcome to Writers and Books Visiting Author Series. My name is Dan Hurd. I'm the Director of Adult Programs. Writers and Books is a nonprofit literary arts center in Rochester, New York. We offer readings, workshops, and literary programming for people of all ages, all currently available online. Our theme for 2021 is Taking Care. We're celebrating different ways we can take care of ourselves and take care of others this year. You can check out our upcoming schedule at wab.org. Please say hello in the chat and let us know you're there. Feel free to submit questions to the Q&A function. Books are available through our bookstore, Ampersand Books. I'll put the link in the chat. We're so happy to have Kelli Jo Ford with us today. First, we'll hear her read, then she'll be in conversation with Daystar Rosalie Jones. Daystar Rosalie Jones was born on the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana and acknowledges Pembina Chippewa ancestry as passed through her mother's legacy. Daystar is a dancer, choreographer, teacher, and writer. In 1980, she founded her own company, Daystar, Contemporary Dance Drama of Indian America, now recognized to be the first native modern dance company in the US. Since then, she has created over 30 choreographic works and other published writing on contemporary Indigenous dance and theater. She was given a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Institute of American Indian Arts in 2016. Daystar continues to create unique native-based dance theater and is working on a personal and professional memoir. Kelli Jo Ford is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. She is the recipient of numerous awards and fellowships, including Paris Review's Plimpton Prize, the Everett Southwest Literary Award, the Catherine Bakeless Nason Award at Breadloaf, a National Artist Fellowship by the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation, and Adobe Paisano Fellowship. Her fiction has appeared in the Paris Review, Virginia Quarterly Review, Missouri Review, and the anthology 40 Stories, New Writing from Harper Perennial, among other places. Crooked Hallelujah is her debut novel in stories. Publishers Weekly has said about it, Ford's storytelling is urgent, her characters achingly human and complex, and her language glittering and rugged. This is a stunner. Kelli, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for inviting me to join you all this evening, and thanks for that lovely introduction as well.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to you, and we'll hear you read.
Wonderful. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. It's an honor to join you all and to get to read a little bit and speak with Daystar. I'm really grateful for this chance to be with you. I thought that this evening I would start from the beginning of the book. It's a novel in stories. That's how I think of it. So I thought I would read from the first story. It's called Book of Generations. 1. When Lula stepped into the yard, the stray cat Justine held took off so fast it scratched her and sent the porch swing sideways. Justine had been feeding the stray, hoping to find its litter of kittens in spite of her mother's disdain for extra mouths or creatures prone to parasites. She tried to smooth cat hair from her lap. She'd wanted everything to be perfect when she told her mom that she had tracked down her father in Texas and used the neighbor's phone to call him. That thing's gonna give you worms. Lula dropped her purse onto the porch. She hadn't been able to catch a ride home from work. And with a deep sigh, she untucked her blouse and undid the long green polyester skirt she had started sewing as soon as she had seen the help wanted sign at the insurance office. She was a secretary now. And as she liked to tell Justine, people called her Mrs. and complimented her handwriting. I'll wash up, Justine said. She had already decided that today wasn't the day, like yesterday and the day before that. At least let me say hi. Lula kicked off dusty pumps and let her weight fall. I'm sorry, I lost my place a little bit. Let her weight drop into the swing beside Justine. The swing skittered haywire as Lula pulled bobby pins from her bun, scratching her scalp. Her long salt and pepper braid fell past her shoulder and curled under her breast. Bless us, Lord, she said, the words nearly a song. She closed her eyes, and as she whispered an impromptu prayer, she touched the end of her braid to the mole on her lip that she still called her beauty mark. As a girl, Justine had pored over the pictures from Lula's time at Chilocco Indian School, trying to see her mother and the stone-cold fox who stared out from the old photographs. Lula's clothes hung loosely, even more faded than the other girls in the pictures, but something about her gaze, framed by short black curls of all things, made it seem as if she were the only one in the photo. If Marilyn Monroe had come of age in an Indian boarding school and had fierce brown eyes instead of scared blue ones, that would have been young Lula. Justine kept the old pictures in a box hidden in the top of the closet where she kept her Rolling Stones and a mood ring, other forbidden things. She hadn't thought of the pictures in ages, but she did so now as she watched her mom in prayer. Lula whispered amen, caught Justine staring. Granny's out gathering wild onions with Aunt Celia, she said quickly. Late in the year for it, Lula said. She unrolled her nylon stockings and wiggled her toes in the air. In the way of Cherokee women, Lula could still make you feel that she held down the earth around her one moment and then seem almost like a girl the next. Did you do your homework? I swept and did the rugs too. My teeny, Lula said, calling her the nickname that had stuck when Justine's middle sister Josie hadn't been able to say her name. Together they pushed the swing back and let it fall forward. Justine closed her eyes. In the cool air that had come with the night's rain, her mother's warmth felt nice, which made the words she'd been practicing feel all the worse. Evenings like this make me wonder how a body would want to set their bones anywhere other than these hills, Lula said. Justine opened her eyes. The two-bedroom house they rented with her granny sat on the edge of Beulah Springs, the outer walls almost as much tar paper as asphalt shingle. She had her own room now that her sisters Dee and Josie had married themselves out of state, but her mother and granny still split a room barely big enough for one. Hand-sewn curtains strung on a clothesline separated their beds. The low green hills beyond the train tracks seemed like folds in a crumpled blanket after Dee sent her pictures of Tennessee mountains. Justine had a good idea why a body might light out for other hills, other lands. I talked to Daddy. Her nerves blurted it out for her. Lula put her feet down to stop the swing. Justine couldn't read her mother's face, but she wished she could put the words back in her mouth, swallow them for good. Justine's father had dropped the family off for a Saturday night service at Beulah Springs Holiness Church almost 7 years back. As far as anyone could tell, he had then been swallowed up by the Oklahoma sky. He'd never sent an ounce of child support or a forwarding address, never even called. Lula held herself together with a religion so stifling and frightening that Justine, the youngest and always the most bullheaded, never knew if she was fighting against her mother or God himself, or if there was even a difference. Still, her father was a betrayal of the knife in the heart variety, something far beyond all their fighting, and here he was on a cool spring evening right between them. He's in Texas, near Fort Worth, Justine said. She bit her lip. He asked me to go to Six Flags with him, just for the weekend. He has a little boy now, I guess. She almost hoped Lula would hit her, but Lula stared into the hills. It wasn't clear she had heard, so Justine's mouth kept moving. Six Flags, it's an amusement park with roller coasters. I know you might think it's too worldly, but I can wear long skirt on the rides and all, and it's sort of like a big playground. Justine forced a smile. She pushed a strand of her hair back into her bun and waited. Sorry, Mama. Lula remained quiet, focused on the horizon. I guess I pestered Mr. Bean at the plant so much he helped put me in touch. She didn't say that she had gotten the information from her dad's old foreman almost 2 years ago, and then been so ashamed that she tore the paper into bits that she spread over Little Locust Creek. A few weeks back, her treacherous mind had begun to play the numbers across her thoughts, a musical sequence that interrupted her over dinner or during tests. I'm real excited about Six Flags, she said, and despite everything, she realized it was true. I'll talk to Pastor about it, Lula said finally. She pushed herself out of the swing and walked inside. At first, Justine was surprised at how well it had gone. Then she saw Lula's purse kicked over on the porch, her comb and Bible in a puff of cat hair. Justine scrambled to retrieve them and ran her hand over the textured leather cover of the heavy book. She pushed past the screen door and went into her mother's room, where she could hear Lula already in prayer. One of Lula's drawings of a Plains Indian teepee was tacked to the closed door. Justine knew that on the other side of the teepee, her mother knelt as she did in church. Instead of a wooden pew or an altar, Lula's face was buried in her twin bed if she had made it that far. Justine ran her finger over the smooth indentations of her mother's ink. She wanted to take Lula, the purse, and the Bible, and decided that if Lula stopped praying, she would make herself push through the door. She would go into the small dark room, or maybe she would lay her head on her mother's shoulder. If she did, Justine knew that her mouth would open back up. Instead of telling Lula about Six Flags and a new half-brother, Justine would tell her about what Russell Gibson did to her. She wouldn't be able to omit the details of the night she'd snuck out and met him down their dirt road, how he looked back over his shoulder, then let her steer the car while he pushed from the open driver's side door, only cranking the engine once they were well out of Lula's earshot. How her stomach flip-flopped over the way he had looked at her as he drove, shaking his head, saying 15, and how her insides had frozen when she noticed a blanket folded neatly in the back seat. She would say how very sorry she was that she had pretended to be asleep that night when Lula stuck her head in the dark room and said, "Good night, my teeny, love you." She would tell her how she had thought his abrupt movements must have been what first dates were made of. She would tell Lula that she said no, quietly at first. But Lula's prayer rose and dipped into a moan. Then great body-shaking sobs vibrated through the door into Justine's hand, along her arm and into her chest. She dropped the purse and Bible on the kitchen table and locked herself in the bathroom. "Shit, shit, shit," she muttered, feeling as if her bones were shaking. She took a can of Aquanet, covered her eyes, and sprayed it all around her head. She waved hairspray from the air and then scrubbed her face red with scalding water. Her father's blue eyes reflected back at her, not Lula's brown eyes, or eyes that seemed her own even. Mostly she didn't think about him anymore. She didn't think she wanted to see him, but what was done was done. She decided then that she would go to Six Flags with her father and never think of Russell Gibson again. It was as if her young heart could only hold the two emotions, one a guilt so deep for betraying her mother that it left her feeling like a human rattle, empty save for a few disconnected bones, and two, a joy so sudden and surprising at the thought of riding Big Bend, the fastest roller coaster in the world, that she felt she might pass out. Section 2. "We'd love to have you, babe," her father had said. "We'll go to Six Flags. It'll be a blast." Through the crackly long-distance line, his baritone sounded familiar but busy, his words fireflies that flitted between them without illuminating a thing. She cradled the telephone on her shoulder and counted France, Spain, Mexico, the Confederacy, United States on her fingers, trying to think of the sixth flag. "Roller coasters big as mountains," he had said. "Hold on." She heard muffled talking, then he came back. "Justine, is everything okay?" "Just dandy," she said, and he was off again, filling the distance between them with empty words. It was a presumptuous question after all these years. Is everything okay? Where to begin? She knew he had meant why now, just like she knew that if he had really wanted her to visit, she wouldn't have had to go to such lengths to find him. She should have called her oldest sister, who was spending the summer on the Holiness Camp Meeting circuit with her new preacher husband. Six Flags, like the basketball team she had wanted to join last year, was of the world. Justine could hear Lula already. "The world passeth away and the lust thereof, but he that doeth the Lord of God abideth forever." Justine was only 15, but she held no illusions nor intentions of abiding forever. Maybe Six Flags would be less hurtful than the truth that she needed to get away from here and that her father was there. She had imagined the night for weeks after Russell Gibson had spoken to her on their class trip to Sequoia's cabin. When she had seen him working on a water leak outside the stone house covering the cabin that day, she recognized him. Her cousin John Joseph played music with him. She knew he was 20-something, Choctaw, already back from the war. He had his shirt off and a rolled red bandana holding walnut-colored hair out of his eyes. When he saw her looking, he grinned and dropped his shovel for a pickmatic that he buried in the red earth. She slipped away and let him write a phone number on her wrist, not telling him that they didn't have a phone. She liked that he wasn't much taller than her, but had wisps of a mustache. She thought the homemade outline of the Hulk tattooed on his forearm was cool. Pictured them going to a drive-in movie in Fort Smith. Or maybe he would lean on the hood of his car and sing her a song. Sinful, surely, but nothing she couldn't pray her way out of. Every bit of that had been the work of a girl's imagination, nothing else. They hadn't gone to a movie, and he didn't even bring a guitar. She had her first moment of regret when she looked back at their little house, the porch light glowing on the hill, but then he let her start the car. She revved the engine and laughed. Freedom had been just waiting on the other side of her bedroom window. He used his thigh to push her to the middle of the seat and took the wheel. He passed her his cigarette and rubbed her leg when he wasn't shifting gears. Time and place swirled together as he turned onto the 2-track road that disappeared into Little Locust Creek. He pushed the emergency brake, and before he cut the lights, she could see where the 2-track, broken by black water, picked up on the other side of the creek. She thought she should have fought him, thought maybe she had unknowingly agreed to what happened. Her mind kept mixing up the jumble of memories from that night, but it returned again and again to Proverbs 5, a favorite of church deacons. She suspected she had caused the whole thing. She told herself that if she could forget the terrible night ever happened, it would be so. She didn't sleep for days. Numbers replaced her thoughts. She found her father. When her body grew tired, too tired to keep up her mind's tormented vigil, she dreamed of roller coasters. And I think right here, this is, as I said, is the first story. And I should have mentioned it takes place in the Cherokee Nation. You probably figured that out, but in 1974. I thought that I might move forward a little bit in the book. This is the first Book of Generations. This is a pretty long story, but I thought I might move forward to a story about that's from the point of view of Justine's grandmother, Annie Mae. The grandmother and Justine and Lula, her mom, all lived together, as you heard in that first story. And here is a story called Annie Mae, and it's epistolary. It's a letter that Annie Mae has written. It's early in the book, and this story is actually heavily inspired. There are some lines pulled, in fact, from my great-grandmother's journal that I feel really, really, really blessed to have. Can move my hands over the pages and feel where her pen made the indentions on the lines. It's pretty special. But this is a fictional story, but there are a couple of lines like there's a list in here of prices and items that I pulled directly from my great-grandmother's journal. So this is a pretty short story, and I think I have time to read this one in all the way. Annie Mae, July 23rd, 1982. I never can forget. I got the news my poor lost grandson, John Joseph, passed when I was braiding my hair, fixing to walk to Dandy Dalton's to pay on my grocery bill. I already had my purse under my arm when Thorpe Rogers called on the telephone. I couldn't put any of the sounds he was making into words, but right off I knew. Thorpe Rogers preached on faith power in a special service the night before. Saints got to be sanctified, he said, got to live a good life and right so lost little ones can see the light. He said it in his language, and then he tried to make it right in Cherokee for me and the other old ones. Thorpe Rogers raised his arms up like a picture of good Lord's love. In heaven, he said, we shall reap our rewards. Then his face kind of broke in two, and he said, but we got to get there, saints. We had a good long service, like the ones that used to set my soul to burn, but going home, I did not feel good. The Sequoia Hills, always sweet to me, looked down like cold mountains. Even the moonshine on my arm felt like a stranger. Dear babies, Reney and Sheila by me in the back seat did not make me better. Maybe I knew, but only in my heart first. John Joseph was going cold right then. The boy, he never could stay out of trouble, even when he was a little one. Cracked his head diving in Bluff Hole, July 3rd, 1972. He could hear a song one time and play it all the way through, humming it out as he go. Didn't matter. He sold the electric guitar Thorpe Rogers gave him for $5 so he could buy up Dandy Dalton's candy. January 12th, 1969. I used to back then put things down that happened in this nice notebook Lula gave me. Always would put my thoughts in there as best I could, just for me. John Joseph passed the day before his own birthday, the day before this country would ever call him a man. After I put that down, I could not write another thing in here for a long, long time. The nice leather book was just a ledger. I added up my charges for the month: 39-cent shortcakes, 89 cents hairnet, 3 pounds Crisco, 210, 25 cents pop, 66 cents liver loaf, $1 cash. I stay on my knees after our altar call ends now, but I don't hardly pray. I look for pictures in the altar wood, try to make out long gone faces when I know I should lean hard on myself to get up and go back to my seat. I stay there so long the church goes still. I hear little ones rustling on pallets and sweet sister saints praying, "Thank you, Jesus." Thorpe Rogers and Lula start up again. They weep and moan with good Lord's love. My children, so strong in their chests, that muscle can only be from the good Lord, cannot be me or their cowboy daddy with his drinking and good Lord knows what else. I feel hands on me, skirts dance by, fan me cool. I know they pray this old Indian is finally meeting the Holy Ghost, praying good like I should with fire. Truth is, all I pray is to be able to pray, maybe to be strong when I need to be. One night, right before he passed, I woke up to a broke front door and John Joseph asleep on the living room floor. He had 12 stitches sewed up over his eye. Drunk running around in Sequoia County, and an argument over a girl got him hit with a tire iron. He opened his eyes to me standing over him. He looked scared for a minute, but not of me. Then he came back to me. He stretched and poked his finger on the end of the thread holding him together. He said, "She's so pretty, Granny." He could not pray either. I shushed him. Lulu was still asleep with one of her spells. She would be in a bad way with Joseph there smelling like beer joints, and the screen door broke. Thorpe Rogers wouldn't let him come home from drinking no more already. I should have got on my knees, prayed, and dragged him by the hair and tell him, "You pray," and tell my own self too that the good Lord was listening, and believe it down in my heart. But I thought to myself, I will fix it. I put bologna on to fry and called my sister Celia in Hominy. Celia married an Indian like she should, a big Osage who spoke his language and went to college, a man who kept his hands where he should. He would have work for John Joseph. I blackened the edges like John Joseph liked and handed him the phone. Celia said, "Nephew, you come stay with us, but don't you come home drinking." He hung up and tried to argue, but Lord, that boy listened to somebody finally. He went to Hominy and didn't come home to Celia's one night after he got up there. He took up with some running wild cousins and didn't come back ever. Demons know fire too. Maybe they chased him so hard that he could not slow down until he stopped for good on the side of the road where he came to such terrible, awful rest after 18 years, nearly 18 years. He told me before I sent him up to Hominy to die, "Granny, them old boys and their tire iron, they ain't got nothing on me. You should have seen them." And then he laughed and squinched up his busted eye and doubled over. Black hair sticking all everywhere, needing a haircut. John Joseph tried to fix the broke door with masking tape and a screwdriver before he left. That boy fiddled all morning with the flapping door, singing Elvis Presley songs to me. Never fixed it right. It's still stuck together with tape. Needs a new screen. I told him so that morning. I told him so, and I sent him off to that highway in Hominy. I should have locked the door and never let him leave. I should have tried to scare him with the love of good Lord. John Joseph would probably know better. That boy has a way right to my insides. He tapped the screen with a screwdriver and winked with his good eye. He grinned. He said, "I'll take care of it, Granny. I give nickels to pay on the dollars I charge. I add up, take away. Doesn't even out, and I don't think it will get fixed ever. And I just as soon as stay that way. I see the tape and remember John Joseph holding a screwdriver and eating the fried bologna I fed him, grinning up at me, good eye and bad eye, trying to hide behind that greasy hair. I remember him like that, try to, bent over but looking up, just a warm boy still, saying he's sorry for the trouble, but he'll make it all right. And this old lady, I don't say nothing to him. I don't drag him down to pray and don't pick up the telephone to conspire him away to death. I take that sweet running boy in my arms and I press my face in his wild hair and hold on. Thank you so much for letting me read to you all a little bit tonight.
Thank you so much, Kelly, or Kelli Jo. The book is an amazing work, and of course, it has won awards. It is also your first novel, is that correct? A debut novel, which makes it even more incredible, I think, that as a writer, that you have been able to come to this level in writing with even this first novel. I think it's bodes well for what we are going to hopefully see from you and read of yours in the future. I know that not everyone is familiar with Oklahoma or with Native North America in general.
Right.
Of course, this last year through the pandemic, I think forces have been at work that have brought the struggles of various peoples, of various nationalities and ethnicities that live on this land, which is of course a native land. And you pick up the story in the 1970s, more than 100 years after the efforts of colonization drove us from in many instances, away from our original homelands or original places of living. And Oklahoma and the tribes and nations who are there now, that are now there, is perhaps one of the best examples of Indian removal from lands of origin. Now, in your writing and in the storytelling, we get bits and pieces of what that might have been, a reference to the stomp dance, occasionally a word in Cherokee, used by various people, usually the women, and the food, the references to food is so tactile and sensory. You're really making the story come alive in various ways, and through the senses was really one of the primary hooks for me in reading the book. I'm going to just say real briefly For those who don't know, that President Andrew Jackson and Congress enacted the Indian Removal Act in 1830, and that caused the forcible removal of nations who were originally living in what is now Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, Florida, Tennessee. Those peoples were the Choctaw, Creek, Chickasaw, Cherokee, and Seminole, which later became the 5 civilized tribes once they were removed. But of course, that removal included the Trail of Tears, that people can certainly read more about, learn about. But it's interesting to me that the people were removed so that the new settlers could grow cotton on their land, which also proliferated slavery at the time. So all of this is background, a backstory to your story. And I wanted to mention that for those people who might not be aware of that. I was not aware that the Holy Roller Christian sect was this predominant in Oklahoma. I was unaware of that. And to find that embedded into this family is very interesting. And that over the years, 1830, 1850, 1870, 1900, time is going by. People have gone through the boarding school experiences and in a sense also forced into Christianity. By now, by 1970, it's much more, it's embedded, I think, to the point of naturalness and true belief, and having taken the place of the old ceremonials and the old spiritual practices. In reading your book, we just get touches of that and sort of teasers of, okay, there it is. It's still there. It's under the rug, in the background. It's still part of the people because bits of language are still there. Bits of food are still there. And certainly the way the people live with nature and in the environment. And your book really ends up being a totality of living in nature. When we reach the final chapters, and perhaps it's an apocalypse, and the century riders are there, ready to meet this challenge. However, they're going to do that. So I'm saying all this because I think there are many layers to your thinking in finally doing the writing. I would like to ask you, was this religion present in your family, or at least in these characters,
Mhm.
based on your family? I mean, how close does this come to autobiographical?
Sure. I mean, it's really the way that I talk about it is that it like my life as a kid in Oklahoma when I was little really inspired the fictionalized characters and the events, but I think about it as like the bones of the story come from um, my life. And then I created characters and situations, let them kind of live their own life on the page. But um, I was, I was a little girl who lived when I was young in a house with my great grandmother, whose first language was Cherokee, and my grandmother and my very young mother, who was 16 when she had me. So, some of like the bones of that the story, the fictionalized story hangs on comes from that. And then we left the Cherokee Nation when I was pretty young, and but we're often, like kind of going back and forth growing up. So, it was heavily inspired, but really I think that what drove the book was kind of like this for me looking home and looking at the women who I feel like raised me and loved me and in many ways not just cared for me but carried me even later when I got older. Like I just have these fiercely loving, powerful women in my family.
Yeah.
And and you put a bunch of those people together in a house and things are going to happen. That's natural human drama. So
Yes.
so the women who brought me up really, I think, inspired the story. And it was kind of a looking back toward home for me. I feel like that's kind of what I've been doing ever since I started trying to write. I didn't set out to write this book, but these stories were just like, that was, I just in art, like I just couldn't stop looking toward home. And so every story was in some way inspired. I now know, I didn't know it at the time because it felt like a flaw, right? I feel like I keep writing the same characters. I was writing short stories, like, why can't I think of any new characters? But it was because I was working on a bigger project. I just didn't realize it yet. And that project was looking toward home and looking toward I'm not really a writer who starts with an idea. It's kind of a real kind of an intuitive, emotional place that this book came from. But I was looking in the book at like the way that Cherokee culture in my family in some ways meshed with, in some ways collided with a very fundamentalist form of Christianity. And Holy Rollers, like the Holiness Church, I don't think it's necessarily super common in Oklahoma or the Cherokee Nation. It's more common there than there are other places where I've lived. But I do think that for Sterling Harjo, who wrote and produced Res Dogs on Hulu, he had a documentary film called, did you see this? This May Be the Last Time is what it was called.
No, I haven't.
It's really wonderful, but he's trying to find out one of his grandfather, I think, who went missing, and he's trying to like figure out, like explore what happened to him. But it becomes this exploration and meditation on his family Christian church and the way that they sing in their own Muskogee Creek language, and kind of the way that this church has become an element in their tribal community and keeping culture and language alive. And I think that in Oklahoma and with Southeastern tribes, especially, like the relationship between like tribal culture, I think, and Christianity can be complex. It can be just straight up colonization and, we're gonna like squash the Indian out of you. But also in like, we're we can subvert things and be very creative, and so I think that we've also taken these systems and used them to help to work for us, I think. But that's not the story of this family, because it's such a patriarchal fundamentalist form that there's no room. It's a fearful form, I would say.
Mhm.
There's not really room for a lot of coexistence, I would say, in the church of the family, because there's that line that stomp dances are were deemed of the devil, and that's, growing up, like, we didn't get to go do that stuff. I had cousins who did, who again were also Christians, but it
Yeah,
was more of a coexistence of,
yeah,
and this sort of
right.
mishmash of beliefs and traditions and cultures, but we couldn't do that or go to powwows, or even as Justine can't even go to a basketball game.
Yeah.
So, and that is the way that my mom was raised, and me too when I was little, until we left.
Okay, yes. And as I was, living with the book for a while, it also struck me that that kind of fundamentalism, and especially giving into the spirit and speaking in tongues and moving,
Mm.
has a certain connection to spirituality that I thought, oh, I could understand how maybe one would be attracted to that if
Mhm.
one did not have the old traditional ways.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
And
that
the music in the churches, this is very percussive, and it's communal, like as an adult, like I would occasionally think,
right.
I'll try to
Yeah.
go, I'll see what it's like. I'll go to this church or something, and it's like people are up and singing at you, like there's a choir, and that's not the way that I grew up, and it just feels very stale, because it's everybody
Uh,
participant in the clapping and the tambourine and the singing and the stomping of feet. So I do think, right, that there's probably some familiarity that.
yeah, yeah. I do want to also um, kind of focus for another kind of focus, which is the relationship with these women.
Mhm.
And the fact that you said, especially in your case, the Cherokee women, I love the line in which you say they seem like they're holding down the earth.
Mhm.
I think that is so, again, it's visceral, it's sensory, um, and it's so indigenous in its concept that yes, they are of the earth. Um, and the relationship between these four women, the granny who has, we feel like there's a connection of her to the old style life and beliefs, and then Lula, um, who's ensconced in this new religion, Justine, her a child,
Mhm.
and then is it Reney,
Reney. Mhm.
who's her child, and the bonds between these four women is so strong, um, and that is the other, I think, what should I say? One of the what connects the story from beginning to end, of course, is all these women.
Mhm.
And of course, the men are there, uh,
Sometimes.
coming and going, coming and going. um, and, and I find that very, very, very beautiful. And it's a way to, well, it does ground the story, and it gives the entire story, its strength, and it's we see how these women adapt from one generation to the next, up through Reney, who finally goes to college, but comes back. She comes back. And I won't talk about the last scene, but the fact that you're tying the end of the book to what we're experiencing now in globally, not necessarily, I would think we're not calling it apocalypse, but the struggles that nature itself is having and the earth itself is having with what we've done to it over the last, I don't know, some people say 400 years. So anyway, those are some thoughts I had. I suppose we should go to questions to see if we have questions from the audience or comments.
Looks like Dan says we have time for one more, and it looks like there's one question in there. That's perfect.
How and why did you decide on this short story format for your novel? Kind of exciting.
Oh, thank you for that question, Kathy. So it was something that arose organically. I still think of myself as a short story writer. I was writing short stories, and I just wanted to write one good short story and make it as good as I could until it was what it was going to be, and set it aside and write a new one. And they kept coming from the same family, well, the same place, and eventually the same family. It took me a while to realize that, this is the same character I was writing before. I was trying to give her a new name, but clearly this is Justine again, speaking to me. So I kept doing that. And I imagined if I ever were to write a book, it would have been a short story collection, but eventually the stories were too connected. And so once I started working with an agent, he really helped me shape the book, because it was not what I envisioned from the beginning. And so we shaped the book together. He helped me do that, and helped really focus it more on the movement. It's about the 4 generations, but focus it more from the beginning to the ending on the movement of Justine and Reney and where they end up. So, there were stories. There was an earlier story where the great grandmother was the main character. It's kind of a Justine and Granny story, but there was an earlier one that probably took place in 1971 or 2. And it just ended up not fitting. So it was just a matter of shaping it and trying to get it the best, larger narrative that we could. But it was an organic process, and it was challenging to think about it, the larger narrative, because it wasn't my comfort zone.
Are you working on something specific now?
I've struggled to work during the pandemic for a lot of reasons. So I'm slowly getting back to it. What I'm working on now is really more of an idea and a few pages. But it's another story that is about mothers and daughters, Cherokee mothers and daughters. It takes place in the Cherokee Nation. It takes place during in the year before the Oklahoma City bombing, of the federal building there.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So
I'm hoping things are feeling a little bit more whole in terms of being able to write again.
Okay. All right.
I wish we had more time to talk. I would like to ask you questions about your work too. I really appreciate you taking the time to read the book and talk with me, Daystar.
Yes.
Really
okay. Thank you very much. Maybe we'll talk more in another way. Yeah.
I would love to. I'd love to stay connected and learn more about the work you're doing and that you've done at IAIA. I would really love that.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Miigwech.
Thank you
No.
to you both. Yeah, that was wonderful. I want to thank our funders here. I'll say buy the book. The link is in the chat. Thank you to our funders. Thank you to Kelli Jo Ford, Daystar Rosalie Jones. A video of this talk, as well as our other readings and events, is on our website, wab.org, and you can see our upcoming schedule there as well. I want to thank everyone for coming, and have a great night.
Thank you, Dan, so much.
Take care.
Good night. Thank you.